Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another of our webinar series. This time on a Thursday afternoon. Seems to be that we've got into a bit of a routine now at this point. So much of a routine, we might change it for next week, but no, we'll certainly stick with these times. They seem to work reasonably well for people. Hot foot on the back of last week's topical one from Tommy Smith around changes in HR legislation. I think Tommy was actually working on his literally about 5 minutes before we went live around all the new changes in statutory sick pay and so on. So fair play to Tommy for being able to do that at the last minute and update his. But hot on that hot topic, let's introduce another hot topic today, which is the whole area of cyber security. And before I introduce my panel, I just wanted to, because it is such a hot topic at the moment, just wanted to read you something that was on the RTE website actually around the whole HSE cyber attack and the impact that it's done. This was from Paul Reed, and he said the damage caused by the cyber attack and the devastating impact it had on the health service cannot be overstated. He said that the attack disarmed many clinical and medical teams from the basic tool set they needed to treat ill patients. It completely wiped out over 2,000, that's 2,000 systems, which are all having to be rebuilt from scratch. He said many public or private organizations would have been completely overwhelmed, but for the relentless passion and commitment of the HSE healthcare teams. He said there are likely to be very long lag time in rebuilding the services. It's not about getting a decryption key. We have to rebuild systems in a whole different way, and it's left a trail of destruction behind, which we're going to now have to clean up. So some salutary words there, and I think all of us had that sort of mother of God moment from when we heard that the HSE had been hit by that cyber attack on the back of everything they'd gone through in the last 12 months. Anyway, look, I want to move on. Our team today, I'm going to introduce in a moment John Gleeson, who's Director of Radius Technologies. John's going to be talking to you for about 30 minutes or so and giving you his insights into cybersecurity and what can be done to protect yourselves. And then I'm going to open it up. We've got three experts on hand for a bit of a panel discussion for about 20 minutes after that. So Marcella Calori from Carrick-Dunn, Sean Gleeson from McCabe's Pharmacy, and Bruce Hopkins from Dublin Airport Authority. So I'm delighted to have four great speakers join me this afternoon, and thank you so much, guys, for making the time today to join us. But without further ado, let me introduce John, who's going to go through some slides with you. And as always, if you've got any questions or any comments you want to make, please drop them into the chat box or the Q&A function, and we'll give ourselves 10 or 15 minutes at the end of this today just to pose these questions to some of our panel. John.
Good afternoon, folks.
Perfect, John.
And welcome to this REI Cybersecurity webinar. I'd like to thank Duncan and his team for the invite. As I said, my name is John Gleeson. I'm a Director of Radius Technologies and have been involved in the IT industry for nigh on 30 years, for more years than I care to remember, as the saying goes. Just a brief party political broadcast on who we are, who Radius are as a company. We are a private cloud solutions provider where we provide virtual servers, co-located servers in a secure environment in Dublin data centers. We're cybersecurity consultants. We also have a telecoms division where we do telecom solutions along with integration into your CRM systems, etc. About 50% of our client base is in the retail space. Radius have been in business for 25 years, and we also provide managed IT support. We're a long-standing gold partner with Retail Excellence Ireland. We are a Microsoft Gold partner. All our engineering staff have to keep upskilled and up to date in those skills to maintain that accreditation. We're also a Cyber Essentials certification body, which essentially means we can assess your cybersecurity on your IT systems, identify remedial actions, excuse me, and issue a certificate. Many benefits around that. We also hold 2 ISO certifications, one for 9001 process, and we're also 27001 information security certified. I know that looks slightly funny, but I want to start on that. Here's Igor from Leningrad, and he's currently browsing the dark web, finding out that Dan Joe Creedon from Kazakhstan is waiting 4 years for a hip replacement. It sort of leads on there from what Duncan said in terms of the HSE. The perception of cyber criminals in the past has been someone like Igor, or a spotty teenager in their bedroom hacking a system simply because they can, or they get a thrill out of it. But these days it is entirely different. The reality is that you have organized criminal gangs, well organized, they're well funded, they operate like a business, and essentially they are outside of the law in Western Europe. They're outside of Interpol and Europol and other policing bodies. What I'd like to do to illustrate to you how organized these guys are, I'll give you a case study or a little story, and this is completely true and factual. Late one bank holiday Friday afternoon, we got a call from a retailer, a multi-site retailer in Ireland, well known. They have their own IT in-house staff, and they were in trouble. They had been hacked, and not only had they been hacked, but all their information had been encrypted. So we asked the question, do you have backups? Oh yes, we have backups, etc. When we went and checked, no, they didn't. The backups hadn't run for over a year. They had no replication on their servers, and equally they had no offsite backups. The only option in this instance, there was literally no other option, was for us as a company to get up to speed on how to register, to buy Bitcoin, to transfer Bitcoin, and all the bits around that. Now, the outcome for this particular company was good. The key worked, and we got their information back. Now, but just to illustrate to you the professionality of these guys, the following day, the kick in the tail, if you want to mix metaphors, was that they actually sent us a customer satisfaction survey. How did we do? Was the experience good for you? Is there anything we can do to improve? That's the level that these guys are operating at. They're slick and they're professional. So a couple of stats for you. 1 in 8 retailers have been attacked in the last 12 months. 46% of retail business have a cyber strategy in place, and 52% is the global average for all businesses. So the retail business is lagging behind in that regard. That's from Grant Thornton. And 24% of all cyber attacks were targeted at retailers in 2019. That makes them the highest by industry. So if you look on the left-hand side of that slide there, you'll see, and it's on the increase, you'll see the increase from 18% to 24%. And just read that little bit there. As in previous years, incidents occurred across many different economic sectors. The largest share of incidents involved the retail industry, with traditional bricks and mortar retailers and the e-commerce environments comprising about 24% of the total, and the rest were following behind. So that is a stark statistic for you. So how can I protect my business? There's 3 areas up for discussion today: your IT infrastructure and associated systems, educating your staff, tips for e-commerce protection. And then there'll be some key points and recommendations to take away from today. The tagline there, IT security is like layers of an onion. One layer is not enough. Your IT security needs to have multiple levels. So some companies may think, oh, well, I've got an antivirus solution in place, I'm covered. No, you're not. Some companies may have email filtering on its own. No, you're not. But add the 2 of them together, and then you've just strengthened your IT security and your cyber security. So the first question to ask yourself as a company is, who is responsible for your IT security and management oversight? Is it your in-house IT manager or your IT resource? No, it's not. Is it your outsourced IT partner? So companies such as ourselves? No, it's not. Is it your management team and board of directors? Yes, that's who is responsible for your IT security and management oversight, not to leave it to others. So what is your plan? Some pointers. RTO is short for recovery time objective. In plain English, that means in the event of a cyber attack, or not specifically a cyber attack, it could be any disaster that occurs. It could be your servers going offline. It could be any number of things going wrong with your IT systems. What is your recovery time objective? In other words, how long can you as a business be down? How quickly can you recover? Do you need to recover in 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week? What is that RTO? What is that recovery time objective? And ask yourselves questions. Will my point of sale systems run if my back office is offline, for example? Can I continue to trade? Questions like that. Can you define what your recovery time objective is? And that's very, very important. And your recovery point objective, to what point do you need to recover your systems to? Is it the last transaction? Is it a minute ago? Is it like an RTO? Is it last night? Is it last night's backups? Is it last week? Every business is different. Your data backups, what do they look like? Do you have a 3-2-1 position? 3-2-1 basically means have you 3 copies of your data on 2 different systems and 1 of them in the cloud? Very, very important. And then do your backup systems actually align with your recovery time objective? Now, that really means you could be backing up your files and folders, for example, onto perhaps a NAS box, maybe in the cloud, whatever it might be. And if your internal servers go down for whatever reason, and you have to recover that server, you have to rebuild the server, reload the applications, pull the data off the backups, and that could take 5 days. Is that your RTO? If not, you need a different solution in place. So that's some questions for you. The point with Mr. Sparrow here is that thieves are not the most honest of people by their very nature. And the tagline in this one is, don't let paying a ransom and a fingers crossed approach be the fallback security and data recovery position for your company. It's just not tenable. So some questions for you. Have you enabled 2-factor authentication on your email system and all other key applications accessed via the web or remotely? 2-factor authentication is another layer of security in your systems. If you are using a username and password and you have a phone, you can get a separate code texted to your phone. So if a cyber criminal manages to get access to your credentials being your username and password, they also need your phone. So the likelihood of that is fairly slim. And not just your email system. And that's an easy win on most systems, particularly on the email. It's free, it's there, it just needs to be implemented. 91% of all cyber attacks begin with a phishing email. And that's from Deloitte. So as our friend Shrek said, you know, it's like an onion donkey, my worst Scottish accent ever, but security has layers. Use 2-factor authentication. It's a really easy win and it's a great way to shore up your security. Look at your systems. Do you have local admin rights on PC and servers? In other words, if you can install something on your PC or laptop, that means a cyber criminal can. And that's how ransomware takes hold in your IT systems. Once it's in and the end user can install locally, then the ransomware can install locally as well. Look for the shares on your network and boom, you're gone. Can you disable your antivirus? If you can, so can the attackers. Is your antivirus managed centrally? So can you look at one screen and say, yes, all my devices are up to date, or no, this one isn't, that one isn't, that kind of thing. Is the server default admin account still enabled? If attackers get onto your system, get onto your server, and the administrator account is active, all they have to do is look for passwords, and those passwords might have been gotten from email compromises. Is your firewall got the default administrator password on it as well? If it has, change them. changing after this meeting. Staffing. Have you ongoing training for your employees? And in that, it's to look for things like phishing emails, how to identify them, run phishing simulations. Have you processed there to validate bank account changes? And the reason for that line is that if an attacker gets what are called man-in-the-middle attacks, whereby they compromise your email system, they sit there, they look at what's going on, and all of a sudden you get an email that looks like it's from a supplier or a customer to change their bank account, and somebody goes and just changes it without calling the particular company in question, and then all of a sudden money flows out. And it's a double whammy. Not only have you paid the attackers, you still have to pay your supplier. So implement those phishing simulations regularly. Take on a third party to do this. I've seen companies do it on their own domain, and you can't blame your staff for clicking on the links, because they see your domain on the email that comes in. Of course, they're going to click it because it looks legitimate. Implement policies in terms of staff induction. So, do you have an onboarding, offboarding process in place? Do you have an induction process in place? The phishing training that we mentioned earlier. I just give an example of what we see. Sometimes we go onto systems and employees who have gone 2 or 3 years are still there on live accounts. And most importantly, with the rush to work from home and the likes, staff who have had remote access into the systems, they're gone, but yet they have not been taken off the server. They're still live. They still have access to the systems. So very, very important. Implement an onboarding and the offboarding process for your employees. So make your team the superheroes and make them part of the solution, not part of the problem. So 1 week after the HSE attacks, there were 155 others notified to the Garda Cybercrime Division. Man-in-the-middle attacks are on the increase. Like I said, they're on the last slide in terms of the invoice redirection. Phishing emails are a daily occurrence. And at least 10 companies in this webinar have already been victims. That's food for thought. This is not what you want to see when you log onto your systems in the morning. And the reason I put that there is, what position do you start with? And that position is, assume that you will be hit. That's your default. Assume you're going to be hit, put your processes in place. In the last 5 days, some breaches that have been notified to ourselves. A Limerick-based company was hit with a man-in-the-middle attack, and the amount of money that was transferred out of that company into a cyber criminal's bank account was staggering. I know it's not the biggest one there, but it's probably the biggest one we've actually seen to date. A Cavan-based company was hit by an invoice redirect scam, and 4,000 went out to the cyber criminal. And as I said earlier, that's a double whammy. Not only did they pay the $4,000 to the cyber criminal, they still have to pay their supplier. And the Wexford-based company was hit by ransomware about 5 days ago, and it was a substantial ransom that was asked for. So in terms of e-commerce, has your developer secured your website? Well, quite often we just leave this to the developers if we're not proactive about it. We don't ask the questions. So it's time to ask the questions. Is the default admin account for the backend system that the website is built on, is that gone? So whether it's WordPress or Wix or Dreamweaver or Weebly or any of the others, it has two-factor authentication, which we discussed earlier on, that can be applied to the online systems as well. And have you deployed advanced security controls? So if it's WordPress, it's WP Security that can determine if there are a number of failed login attempts, for example, and lots of others besides. So double check your security on your website. Have you secured your website? It's like the IT, just like your IT systems. Have you a robust backup system in place? Just like your IT systems, have you a disaster recovery plan in place with a recovery time objective? So who do you call? What do you do? Where are the backups? How quickly can we get back up and running? How quickly can we get back trading again? They're the questions that you need to ask your suppliers. If you trade globally, have you a CDN or a content delivery network in place? That's essentially if you trade with, I don't know, Japan or someplace, that you have a replica, for want of a better word, website operating locally so that the traffic isn't flowing into the master website. And again, just like your IT systems, keep all your software and your plugins up to date. Online e-commerce, review how your website connects with your back office and your stock control systems. Check to see if there are any security holes or loopholes or open ports, or unsecured connectivity of any type. Ensure your website has an SSL certificate. That's a secure socket layer certificate. The HTTPS, as we're well used to when we look at websites. And again, that it encrypts data. If you're holding customer information, you don't want the Data Protection Commissioner on your back. Software and operating systems, you might recognize the guy there, or that person on the bottom right. As a lot of you are in the retail space. But essentially, POS, older systems a lot of them continue to operate on Windows 7. Now in itself, that's a big threat. But if you have the VLAN or virtual network across your existing network, you can mitigate that problem. And don't give them access directly to the internet to avoid any problems in the future. So some practical tips, just as a recap and a little bit more. Enable two-factor authentication on all online systems, including your email. Question, have you enabled it? Have you enabled it on your email and other key applications that are accessed via the web remotely? Educate your employees on what to look out for in phishing emails, bank account changes and the likes. Question is, if a member of your team got a phishing email, would they recognize it? Is there a process for the accounts team to validate bank details on emails? Have you got that in place? Or are you just saying, sure, everybody knows that? Your backup data, keep the 3 copies of your data live, local, and offsite. The questions for you are you using that 3-2-1 method? Have you defined your RTO? And do your backup systems meet that requirement? That's so important. Local admin rights on your PCs and servers. Have those accounts been disabled? And have you locked down your devices? Review and monitor administration access on your company's email account and server environment. Again, very, very important. How many people have administration level access to your systems? Who is managing your security and controlling access rights on your company files? Restrict the access and get alerted on changes to those access rights. Question, do you know who can access all the company files and read all company emails, including yours? Software and operating systems ensure that the latest patches are deployed to devices and systems, and remove PCs and devices with no longer supported operating systems, or remove them from access to the internet. Are you using outdated EPOS or operating systems that access the internet? It's a question for you. Use a managed antivirus product, one that needs administration level access to disable or change the setting, and one that protects against ransomware. Deploy a centrally managed AV antivirus product that generates alerts if not up to date. Like I said earlier on, where you can view on one page what devices are up to date and which aren't. Can you click on your antivirus product on your PC and disable it? If you can, then the hackers can. Use spam filtering and link checking. These are mail filtering tools on your email systems, preferably not after the emails arrive in your system, but checked on a cloud-based system. There are plenty of them out there. And if you click on a link in an email, do you have a system that checks to ensure it's a valid link? These are very, very cost-effective systems to implement. If someone sends you an email, is it pre-filtered before it gets to your email box? And the risk assessment conversation, discuss and agree a disaster recovery plan, the real-time objectives, the real-time objectives, or your recovery, I beg your pardon, your recovery time objectives, and understand the risks. Discuss cybersecurity at board level and management meetings. So the question for you is, have you had that cyber conversation at senior level? and who in your organization is responsible for your company security and strategy. So the takeaways from today. Who has assessed your IT systems from a security point of view? What is your recovery time objectives? And do your IT systems align with that objective? Who in your company is responsible for its cybersecurity? Do they know? Is there an onboarding, offboarding policy and process in place for staff? And has your IT strategy been discussed at management and board level? We recently commented in a radio interview that I gave, while it's difficult and nearly impossible to protect against zero-day viruses and evolving ransomware attacks, it is possible to ensure your staff are aware of what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. It is also possible for every business owner to ask and understand some basic cyber security questions of their organization and understand where the risks come from. The cyber risk conversation needs to be discussed by every board and every business, and the risks need to be addressed, understood, and planned for. I'd like to say, well, first of all, before I say thank you, there's a random picture of a dog in the last slide, and the reason for that is the internet is full of cats. I just thought I'd give the dogs a chance. So thank you very much, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
John, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. Can you just stay on one? I'm going to ask you a couple more questions before I bring in the other guys. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So first off, radius.ie, that's where best to get you, or is there a better email address that you can give us?
Well, that's the web address, but if they want to contact the sales team, it's sales@radius.ie, and of course they can get us on our telephone number 0818 592 500.
0818, just say that again so people got a pen, they want to write this down. So
0818 592 500.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I just say, Duncan, the radius.ie, there is more information, case studies, that kind of thing, if people want to have a browse, and they get more information. But we're happy to talk to people on the phone as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I must admit, I'm sitting here slightly less comfortably than I perhaps was at the beginning of that. So thank you for scaring the bejesus out of us all.
that wasn't the intention. The intention was to more focus the mind than scare the bejesus.
No. But you've certainly done that. You've certainly focused the mind. Just before we move on to the others, what's the top? I know this all changes so rapidly at the moment, doesn't it? In terms of what's the way these criminals are finding their way into businesses. So what's the top cybersecurity concern that businesses face today? Is there some, it's all so topical with the HSE and so on at the moment, but what in your view, what's the real big thing that we should be looking out for at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it is topical because of the HSE, because that is actually the biggest threat facing business today. It is it's the cybersecurity piece, it's the ransomware piece, it's the phishing, and a mix of a lot. It all starts with that phishing email. It all starts with credentials getting stolen, those credentials then being published on the dark web, for example, where cyber criminals can access usernames and passwords. And it's like water going downhill. It just gathers momentum, gathers pace. Once they have one bit of information, a username and password, they can then find a ways into systems. But the one big one is the ransomware attacks by far and above.
Yeah. Okay. John, will you stay on? Because I'm sure there's a few questions that might come your way
Sure.
as we go through the next few minutes. So brilliant. Thank you so much, John. That was really interesting. I'm going to bring in the other members of the panel now. So Marcella from Carrick-Dunn, first up. You've obviously taken this to heart in terms of Carrick-Dunn, in terms of your own work. But what action have you taken to promote the awareness of cybersecurity in Carrick-Dunn? How important is it to you?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for the invite today. It's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the presentation from John, and I think there's some really good nuggets that we can take away and go back to the business. I was probably apprehensive coming on, thinking that I was only covering a little aspect, but actually the aspect that we have taken and the approach we've taken is turning out to be probably a really big part of how we can protect ourselves going forward. We devised a strategy during lockdown in terms of a training initiative. We had the opportunity, obviously, in lockdown where there were some elements of the business that were still operating, and we felt training, cross-training was a key area that we could focus on. And that was down to, we were doing a lot of process reviews, we were doing a lot of internal reviews where we could see gaps within our work practices. So we created gap analysis. We shared a gap analysis with our teams, and we got some really good feedback. And from that sprung out an internal training plan. And from the internal training plan, then we looked at areas that we could cover off ourselves internally with the experts within the business, and then looked to external service providers to give us other skills that maybe we were lacking within the business. The stores were coming back in May, and we felt we needed to re-induct them into various areas. I was very fortunate to be invited onto the Loss Prevention Forum with REI. And I felt, having listened to my colleagues on that forum, that we were missing a beat, that there was something that we weren't feeling because we weren't being hit, or at least we weren't aware of big hits. And we felt maybe there was something that we were missing. So we kind of went and looked at it. And from that, along with the training initiatives that we had been rolling out, we decided to reinduct the teams, look at the areas that were our biggest threat prior to lockdown within the stores. And then we focused our area, particularly on the month of June, for loss prevention. And what we wanted to do was try and bring loss prevention up on the agenda, both at a store level and at a head office level. So we took two areas and two aspects. We looked at cybersecurity and we're looking at GDPR. So we've created two internal training programs with our experts internally within the business. Our head of IT looks after our cybersecurity, and our head of finance looks after the GDPR. So what we did is we created two internal programs that we will share with both the head office teams and with the store teams, and really bring the focus in on what they're both about. In terms of cybersecurity, what we were focusing in on is phishing and how not to get hooked. And we've really just concentrated that training program to our teams, to anybody who has access to an email. And that's what we've concentrated on. What we do, we've shared the training pack with the stores and with the head office teams. They have 2 weeks to kind of review the information, to go through it with their teams, and then we're going to spot email them some phishing emails to see can they identify whether they're real or not. And it's just to bring that awareness into their domain so that they understand the impact that they have at their level, whether it's at store level or at head office level. And then obviously from a GDPR perspective, it's so important that we get that right across all platforms. So we're really visiting and refocusing on that. So they're the two most important initiatives that we've taken. And I suppose maybe just to round it off from what John has spoken about, we have also taken another measure in terms of creating a loss prevention strategy. My function as stock management is really to make sure that we have visibility on product at all times, and that includes stock loss and stock prevention, prevention of loss. So we've taken it upon ourselves to look at measures and KPIs that we can monitor threats within our business. So that's something I'd be bringing to the table, and really bringing loss prevention, but cybersecurity, really bringing it up the agenda towards, and it is there, we constantly monitor risk within our business, but I think with the HSE attack, it's become really something that's more prevalent, and we need to be talking about it a lot more.
Yeah, and Marcella, do you think your colleagues in store get it? You know, does the average sales assistant in a store in Westport get this, or do they, you know, is it sort of as you do your training, the penny drops, you have that light bulb moment, or is it still a bit vague at the end of it?
I think it's still a little bit vague, and I think that's where we have to maybe up the ante in terms of making cybersecurity really a strategic training topic for this year and for next year. We really bring it into, I mean, alongside health and safety, and bring it up so that it's a really important part of their induction process. It's important as part of their ongoing training, and that they understand the impact of their actions if they click on that link and what happens. So I think it's, from our perspective, from a company perspective, we have to train them and we have to teach them and educate them. But yeah, I think there probably is a little bit of a disjointed thinking. They probably don't realize the impact they have, or they can have within the business.
Interesting. Sean, can I just turn to you from McCabe's? I know you're in the whole online space in your role in McCabe's, aren't you? So what is it, you know, if you look at that website, I know John referred to some of it a little earlier on, but in terms of making that website secure and what you might do to make your website secure, what are the things that you've done in McCabe's there, and how has it worked?
First, hi Duncan. Thanks for having me on, and thanks to the team, and hi to everybody there. Yeah, I mean, this is a constant process for us, really. I mean, I've previously been involved on a website where we had to take it down because of a breach and rebuild it. So I'm very conscious of this whole space. What we've done in the last year or so, certainly since COVID, we've really gone through everything. So we've recently rebuilt our server, and we now have a dedicated server on the eCloud, and no one can access it, and all the access points to it are controlled. On that basis, then the main vulnerabilities we feel we have, now that we've got that, I suppose, security, that we feel that works well for us, is the third party plugins and themes that are on the website. Anything where there's a portal into the website, that's where the remaining vulnerabilities are. So what we did last year is we've added a content delivery network, which John touched on himself. What they typically do is they'll improve your website load time, they reduce your bandwidth costs, and they kind of increase the availability of your content. So that's all really good retail or e-commerce stuff. But additionally, it provides additional security and firewalling, where it, in our case, it's I think it's called DDoS mitigation, which is where it filters out the traffic. So if it sees what we consider, bad traffic or phishing type traffic, it filters it out and just allows the good traffic through. And then finally, with third-party plugins, and it's really important to keep those patched, to keep security updates done. So we put a big focus on always doing that, whether that's the platform itself or some of our plugins. And that's even down to obviously payment providers. We're PCI compliant, and we make sure that's always kept up to date.
Yeah, and you mentioned then, Sean, right at the start of that you'd been a victim of an attack on a website at some point. I think you mentioned, yeah. What did it look like? What was the first thing? How did you discover that you'd been hacked?
Well, that's the whole point, I guess, is that you won't always know. So if it's a ransomware attack, you'll probably find out very fast, because you'll get an image like John showed on one of his slides, and there'll probably be a demand. In our case, it was sitting there accumulating data, and funny enough, what I ran, we had a Magento website at the time, and I ran a test on it that I indicated there may have been an attack, and after further investigation, we identified that, and we felt that. So there was no real obvious thing. There was no impairment to the website. So it was just sitting there silently, and it was under the best advice that we could get. It was thought to take the site down. So we lost, X number of weeks of the site being down to rebuild it, and there's the brand, I suppose. There's the practical detriment, and then there's the ethical detriment to the business as well. So where there's potential for the brand to suffer from it.
Yeah, so it's that brand reputation.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, this is where I suppose a plan as well, and with GDPR rules, which has kind of gone a little bit below this in terms of what people are looking at. It can have devastating effects to a business. So plus a financial cost of not being able to trade if you're in online terms, and the cost of possibly having to rebuild.
Yeah, really interesting. Before I move to Bruce, if anybody got any questions or anything they want to raise with the panel, with John or any of the other panel, then please, as I say, just drop it into the Q&A box or the chat function, and we'll try and get to them before the end of today. Excuse me. Bruce, I'm going to turn to you now, because you know, once upon a time, he says, tongue in cheek, Dublin Airport had thousands of people walking through it every day. And I'm sure those good days are going to come back at some point. Let's hope that's very soon. But, you know, with thousands of people walking through, all of whom are in effect showing personal information to board a plane or to get through security, you know, that information is being handed over. How do you ensure that personal information in the airport is kept safe?
Well, it's a good question, because, well, first of all, to answer your I suppose where things are starting to move again. So, you know, a busy day in June 2019 would have been over 130,000 passengers at the start of the, you know, once the Leaving Cert finishes. We're not going to get that this year, but we're hoping, fingers crossed, 2022, we will be back very close to 2019 levels. In terms of the data, one of the things that, I mean, I'm working in the aviation industry, just going up on 5 years now. One of the things I actually, the Data Protection Office reports into me as well. And one of the interesting things I found in managing our GDPR project back a few years ago was that we always had, it was kind of like almost by default, we had a relatively well designed kind of approach to this, which is that, first of all, we don't own the passenger. You have if you go to the airport, you actually have a contract with your airline, not with us, right? If you park your car, you'd have a contract with us and a relationship directly with us. But you might deal with, you know, the sandwich shop, the retail shop of various sites, which are all organizations that work with us. But our customer is more the O'Brien sandwich shop, the bar, and the airline. We have a relationship with the customers, and we love looking after our customers, as in our passengers. But we try not to keep information on them if at all possible. And that's the secret, is really, if you're an Aer Lingus passenger or a Ryanair passenger, they will keep the master record. We will process it, the passenger and some of that data through security, for example. But when we're finished with that, we only need that for a very limited amount of time. So one of the things that surprised me as a user of the airport, right? So I went in and said, right, let's search for my name. I went on holidays to Portugal, like whatever, last summer, and I went somewhere else the summer before. I did a search, scoured the place to see what I could find about myself, and was both pleased and disappointed that I couldn't find much. There is no record of your last summer holiday unless you go and actually sit with the airline and the airport and put pieces of information together. So we might have some information, but we can't link it to a person. We have codes relate to your bag and everything. So it's quite obviously a complex picture of the information flow, but basically don't keep it if you don't need it. And then it's not personal information. We anonymize, we keep codes, we do various different things. The customer belongs to the airline. And once you're gone through the airport and you've taken off safely, we don't need to worry about that particular person anymore. So we would tend to avoid keeping stuff. And that's really the same. It's kind of the golden rule for any business, is you process what you need. And even our marketing teams, who obviously do a lot of analysis, are very interested in where you come from, where you're going, but that can all be encoded in ways that protect the privacy of the individual. So you don't know it's me, you just know it's, you know, some person with a particular profile who lives in a particular part of the country who, you know, likes to eat a certain kind of sandwich. That's not personal if it's done in the right way. Yeah.
So when I prefer to sit in seat 2B on Aer Lingus, then that's held by the airline and has nothing to do with the DAA.
Yeah, we don't even know where you sit. We just hope you get safely onto the airline.
And so in terms of your vulnerability then, Bruce, in if things were to go awry in Dublin Airport, what is it that keeps you awake at night? What is it you fear in terms of the IT side of Dublin Airport?
Well, it really does link back into some of the comments that John made in his presentation and that Marcella mentioned. We're a business like any other. While the airport is it's a broad kind of business. So we have a transport business, we run buses, you know, we have shops, there's advertising businesses. There are lots of different units within that, but fundamentally, we have people who come to work and who use email, and email is still the single biggest source of the current crop of threats. And when I say current, going back since I joined the organization just over 4 years ago, within the first year, it was very clear that all of the stuff that John was talking about, where some of it was in place and some wasn't, when you go back, we were migrating to the cloud at that stage. You really need to look at the fact that people interact. It's really, as an expression I've used a few times, is the bit I worry about is the bit between the chair and the keyboard. It's the person. Right? It's not about the technology. Technology needs to do what we want. It needs to behave itself. But after that, it's down to talking to people. And even the HSC, what we know about the HSC, an email requires click on the link or open up the attachment. Marcella has mentioned specifically, that, you know, 1,500, 2,000 people. Tools, use online training. I mean, phishing test. Do our phishing testing and how many emails we sent on a weekly basis, and we continue to train people and to repeat the training and then to approach people who fail the tests. And we have basically, so you really have to engage, get them to understand. I mean, it was a very good question you asked about, does the person in the shop in wherever. So we would have a person sitting in a shop who doesn't really know much about IT, and they don't need to. And you go, well, do they understand about clicking on a link? Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but we can find that out. And then we can talk to them, you know. And I did have somebody in the shop in some far-flung location, you know, ringing up going, what was this? And going, you clicked on one of my links, I see. You know, so it's really about that. It's the email is the biggest, still the biggest weakness. Email was designed, you know, to put it simply, designed by hippies back in the 60s. It was never meant to be a secure communications medium used by everybody all day. And it's very difficult to secure.
Yeah. Links
are difficult to manage. Everybody can send links, Dropbox and SharePoint and OneDrive and links everywhere. And as John mentioned, yeah, there are things you can do, but none of them are completely bulletproof. You know, you can't. The valid link is a kind of a nebulous thing in a way that the attackers create websites and register those websites, and then the following day start to use them. So we had suppliers, for example, a supplier's name, a website registered very similar to the name, one extra character in the middle, register the website, send in emails, try and hijack conversations, try and redirect invoices, as the technical saying goes. So it's basically change the bank details of a supplier.
Yeah.
So that's one method.
Yeah, interesting, Bruce. Thank you. I'm just going to go to a couple of the questions that have appeared in the chat box there. So one from Peter here to you, Marcella. I'm not sure how much you can answer this one, but would you be able to share the basic do's and don'ts and consequences sheet that you've done up with the teams? Is there something you did around everybody? Is there?
Well, this is just an internal training pack that we shared with the stores, but absolutely it covers the do's and don'ts. So I can share some content, absolutely.
Yeah, if you could share that maybe with Siobhan or Keelan there, and we can get that out to the people that have come onto this today, that would be really useful, because you know, anything that we can share around that would be, I think, would be beneficial. John, you're still around, I take it, in the background there. I can't see you, but I'm sure you are there. Yeah.
I'm here, Duncan, yes.
Yeah, there's a question there. I think, what happens if all your backups have got bugs in it and malware and things like that? I mean, you know, you talk there about the need to get backups done on a daily basis. And I'm sure there's many of us sitting there going, when was the last time we did a backup? He's saying it, but you know, this can spread, can't it?
It can actually, and that's a very good question. And there's multiple answers to it. I mean, if he knows he has a bug, whoever passed the question, then they probably know what that bug is, and the backup systems can be checked or recovered. Minus that, it depends on what his backup system is. For example, is it full server backup? Is it just files and folders? So the system could be rebuilt from the files and folders without the malware piece in it. So there are lots of different answers to that question, but it should be recoverable.
Okay, all right. And Sean, I'm just going to come back to you, because we talked a little bit there about websites and so on before, and you know, I know we tend to get this coming up on a regular basis, don't we? Particularly at Christmas time, around e-commerce and buying online and all of this, and it came up last Christmas a lot. But the sort of things that we should look out for, that lock at the top of the browser and things like that. What are the key things that we should be looking out for online to make sure the website's safe?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's one of the key things. I mean, I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't say don't buy from a website if you don't know them, but I would, you know, we tend to return to similar websites that we might buy from regularly. So I would be hesitant if you don't know them, if you've never heard of them. I always look at the bottom as well to see do they have physical stores where you know, are they listing a phone number? Is it in Ireland? Is it UK or further afield? Looking at those sort of things. Do they have I suppose a digital map? You know, like social media channels. Different digital touch points. If you're in doubt, and then if look in general, if you're in doubt, don't do it. What sort of payments provider do they use? I mean, if it's something like a PayPal, there's definitely an element of security there. If it's a credit card system that's unidentified to you, you know, I'd be feel less secure myself personally. So that'd be kind of the general things, Duncan.
Interesting. And John, sorry, I'm just going to spin back to you there, but so I'm just thinking about banks and bank security versus, you know, retail security, because we're all transacting with our banks now in terms of online payments and all that sort of thing. Is there anything we should be looking out for there? I mean, you know, I suppose what goes through my mind is if the HSE gets attacked, you know, how vulnerable are Bank of Ireland or AIB from being attacked by these cyber criminals? Is that something we're likely to see in the future?
That's a big question, Duncan.
You've done so well up to now. I thought I'd throw you a curveball.
Thanks very much. Yeah, no, I mean, if you look at worldwide and you look at companies that have been attacked, banks included, you look at the Facebooks of this world, you look at the LinkedIns of this world, and many others, Adobe systems, and you're talking, you know, 500 million credentials stolen at any one particular time, and these companies, including the banks, they spend mega millions on their security, and it's not just firewalls and that, but it's millions, and they have huge IT teams. Can they be? Of course they can. There's nowhere that's not vulnerable in some way. They just have to find a way through. But you know, having said that, should you be worried? Is the question, is there two parts to the question? One is, can these guys get attacked? And number two, how secure would we be banking online? Would that be, or using our mobile phone? I suppose the message there is to people to watch out for the scams. You know, they're the biggies, the emails or the text messages coming through purporting to be from your bank, and go online and give your credentials, log in, change your password has expired, or, you know, it's social engineering. To go back to what Bruce said earlier on, it's that social thing. It's the social engineering piece. It's the urgency of the text. You know, it's going to expire in the next 4 hours. Change your password. Watch out for those. The bank will never do that to you. So, and again, it's like all systems. If you have a phone, keep it up to date to the latest version of the software. Generally, it's free.
Yeah, and that was an interesting, because a question come up here about some operating systems maybe being more prone to cybercrime than others. You know, and we've had all this thing of me about antiquated Windows systems from way back, and that was some of the problems with the HSE, I think, wasn't it? But you know, are some more vulnerable than others, or is it simply just a question of keep updating your software?
Well, keep updating your software. If you're right about the HSE, I mean, one of the big issues was that they're on Windows version 7 or Windows 7, and full of vulnerabilities. Now they are paying for updates to Microsoft for those systems. They're paying an annual fee. It's quite substantial. But that, having said that, you know, if it's a retailer, for example, they're not going to have access to those type of updates, so they can't keep them up to date. They need to change out those systems. That's a given. Keep everything up to date. Patch, update.
Yeah, and that should get you through. Okay.
I mean, one of the things you can do as well is keep things away. It was mentioned earlier on, I think John might have mentioned it, keep things back. Don't connect to the internet. If you've got to have an old system and you can't afford to replace it, air gap. You know, literally don't connect to it. Don't put it on the internet. And you can, it is possible to, you know, it's not advisable, but it's certainly possible if you are, you know, particularly in the current climate, if you're really stuck for money, just isolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bruce. That's you're dead right. I mean, we would have some clients with legacy systems, server 2003, for example, that they might be using some legacy application that they just can't be updated, or some old point of sale or something like that. We have it on the cloud environment. It doesn't have access to the internet, but their systems can still access it from inside in the cloud. It in itself, it can't access the internet, so it's safe. Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. I'm really sorry to have to bring this to a close, but we've literally run out of time, as is normal with these things. I think it's one of these ones. Certainly, it's such an interesting topic, this one, in terms of, you know, future relevance, and it's equally something where you know, I'm sure there's many of us sitting there going, geez, you know, this is a minefield to get into, and it's great that we've got people like you, John, in the background that have got this fount of knowledge that can support people. So again, anybody that's in that space of thinking they need to know more, then you know, go and have a look at the radius.ie website and make contact with John and the team, and I'm sure they'll put you right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to John, especially in terms of your presentation.
Thanks, Doug.
From DAA, to Sean from McCabe's, and to Marcella from Carrick-Dunn. That's been super session. It's as I say, ongoing sessions that we're running around this time on a Thursday, and we'll have another one hopefully next week for everybody, and hopefully that's been really useful. It certainly opened my eyes, and all the very best. Thanks a million, guys. That's been great. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.